awesome. Is it are there any like cannabinoids that you are like really excited about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, at this point, I'm sure most listeners to this are well aware of THC and CBD, but that's just the beginning. There are at least 150 different cannabinoids that the plant produces, and some 200 different terpenoids, the aromatic components that give cannabis its smell. Um, but to answer your question, I'm really excited about cannabigerol. Cannabigerol is sort of the parent to THC and CBD. Normally, the plant doesn't stop there, doesn't make a lot of it, but there are, through selective breeding, plants that are either high in CBG or have CBG only. If they don't have the enzymes to go further down the line, they'll make CBG.
Right.
So CBG has great promise. It has remarkable antibiotic properties. It works on a lot of bacteria that are causing bad hospital-acquired infections like MRSA, multiply resistant Staph aureus, and vancomycin-resistant enterococcus. So these are two very severe infections that people will acquire in the hospital and often lead to prolonged hospitalizations or even death.
So Doc, I mean, cut you off, but so this is something that you would recommend taking like leading into the hospital, like before you go?
Not quite yet. It's also not freely available. The other major area where CBG shows promise is in treating anxiety. It seems to be a really powerful anti-anxiety agent without being sedating or addictive. We did a study last year, 127 people using CBG, primarily preparations that were at least 50% CBG, and really reported it very effective in treating anxiety, depression, sleeplessness. Additionally, it seems to have strong effects on cancer, especially prostate cancer. So, the most common cancer in men. So great promise for this. It seems to be extremely safe. It's a lot more potent than CBD. You don't need as many milligrams of it to have an effect. So I think it's really promising. The other one is THCV. So this is tetrahydrocannabivarin. It's like THC, but it's only got 3 carbons on its side chain instead of 5. So it's different to THC. It actually reduces hunger, and it's shown promise as a treatment for obesity and diabetes and the metabolic syndrome. So things that we get a lot of in this country and in the Western world. I'm sure you still work hard to stay in shape, but most Americans are a little on the heavy side these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we can create a product for, to address obesity, that would be a pretty huge product to come into the space, especially it combats like the stigma in regards to everybody saying, you use cannabis and you get the munchies, that you can actually use cannabis and actually lose weight. I think that'd be an
Yeah,
unbelievable.
well, that's true too. I mean, there've been studies now that show that among regular users, most chronic cannabis users aren't overweight, more like the skinny hippie, if you're going to use that archetype.
Right, right.
Yeah, that's been shown. But, again, it doesn't stop there. This is really a remarkable plant, as you've said. Beyond the cannabinoids and terpenoids, there are other components that aren't intoxicating. They won't be scheduled drugs. One is called canflavin. Flavonoids are things in plants that give them their bright color. So when you think of bright vegetables and berries, that's because of flavonoids for the most part. But these have really strong anti-inflammatory properties and antioxidant properties. So these could be really helpful in treating inflammation and preventing aging type changes. Antioxidants mean they help prevent rust in our aging bodies. But in particular, the canned flavins show real promise. We're working with a brilliant entrepreneur in Canada, Akeem Gardner, who happens to be Black. And it shows you what you can do with different degrees. He has a law degree from England, but he's become a hemp farmer and cannabis entrepreneur. And we're seeing great promise in these canned flavins. So, as long as I've done this, which is 26 years solid, more than that overall, but every day I learn new stuff and see greater promise on the medicinal side for this plant, as well as industrial applications.
No, that's awesome. And big shout out to Keem Gardner. Definitely, I know him. We've worked together on some stuff in the past, and he's definitely very, very innovative in the way that he's thinking about approaching cannabinoids and just looking at this as medicine, right? Especially from a hemp standpoint. So what I wanted to ask you too is, as a neurologist, like, what do you say to people that say that you should only use cannabis at a certain age because your brain isn't fully developed and things like that?
Well, yeah, I think it's an exaggeration. The fact is, there's never been a drug that's been developed for adults that hasn't found application in children. Hard to find an exception there. If a child has a disorder that's serious enough to warrant it, there are plenty of cannabis formulations that could be used, and even including THC. Kids under 10 are really resistant to the psychoactive effects of THC, and that's been amply demonstrated historically and in modern studies. Plus, if you're dealing with a child with severe epileptic syndrome or severe autism, they might be violent to themselves and others. The conventional medicines really haven't made it. And when cannabis can provide relief, there's no morality issue there. And again, there's a lot to cannabis beyond THC. Most of the objections relate to the supposed addictive properties of THC, or the idea that probably some people have that you'll use it and become a hippie or vote Democratic or something else. These are largely misconceptions. Yeah. So no, it's a case of you use it when warranted, and certainly we don't recommend the kids be smoking their medicine, but there are plenty of tinctures and oils that can be used orally, and for a chronic condition, that's going to be a better way to use cannabis anyway.
Got it. So does it matter how you actually receive the THC in regards to like the neurologist? I'm messing all my words up, but for how you deal with the brain and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, it's going to get in. That's not a problem. With smoking or vaporization, it's going to be a lot faster. So that can be important if you had a sudden bout of pain and you've got to get on top of it. But more often we're dealing with chronic conditions. And again, having something that's slow and lasts longer, oral medicine, is going to make more sense. And that's particularly true of kids. And again, I'm not saying that it's perfectly okay for teenagers to be doing, 10 bong hits a night when they should be playing ball or studying. But we also know that isn't going to cause them permanent damage either. So again, we've had 40 or 50 years of propaganda about the dangers of cannabis, and they've been wildly exaggerated. Yes, there are side effects. If overdone, there can be problems, but usually much less than conventional medicines.
Got it. So as a doctor, like, what do you like? What steps does the United States need to make in regards to allowing you to free up for you to be able to do more research? And,
boy, that's the tough one. Well, it's been a Schedule I forbidden drug since 1970, the Controlled Substances Act. It's got to be descheduled. cannabis didn't belong there to begin with.
Right.
So once it's legalized, then we could have a framework for regulating it properly. Um, I have to say, I'm criticizing the government, but I've got to criticize industry too, because it's done a very poor job in providing quality control and safe products where the consumer can really have an idea of what's in it or what it's going to do. But that's a byproduct of prohibition.
Yeah.
If we didn't have that obstacle, you could properly regulate the industry and make it a lot safer and easier to understand for consumers.